Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale. Today I have first-time guest on voice, Carter, joining me. Carter, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. How's it going?
It's going pretty well, man. Thank you. Today you actually been messaging me. You messaged me a few days ago about this deck that you've been rattling off 12 win grand challenges with, and I really immediately noticed two cards that you don't often see anymore in Expo decks, and it's the Pump and the Tesla, which might be now actually more frequently seen in any sort of a siege deck. But it's an interesting deck. I thought I'd have you on and talk a little bit about the deck. So why don't you kind of just start out by telling us a little bit about how you came up with this deck, or maybe someone else did, and how you play it.
Yeah, so as far as how I got the deck, I copied it off of I just seen it in some different leagues and in CCGS. And so I saw it over multiple players, and so I decided to give my own variation a try. And so basically how the deck works is you just pump up pretty much during single elixir, and you almost never play an aggressive expo unless they commit a lot of elixir or you have an elixir lead. And then the Tesla is pretty much there for stuff like balloon, hog riders, any other tank really. And yeah, pretty much just through the game you try to build up an elixir lead and then stack multiple expos and stuff like that.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. So in the beginning of the match, you're going to try to cycle to the pump as quickly as possible. That's like your number one goal.
Yeah, pretty much throughout single elixir, most matchups you just want to be cycling through pumps, and then also cycling through troops like Ice Golem and Ice Spirit, and trying to make as much positive elixir trades as possible.
Okay, so you're building everything up for that for double elixir time, or at least when you have a huge elixir lead, then you can start with the expo. What about, okay? Let's say you have two pumps on the arena and everything's going really really well early on, or let's just say you get to double elixir time. Are you literally just cycling expos at that point?
It really depends on the matchup. In some matchups, I will be more aggressive with Expo if I don't think they have a tank like a giant or a golem, and then in other matchups you have to be patient and wait for them to play that tank before you can send in your Expo. And sometimes you'll keep pumping up until overtime or even later on in the game, just as much as possible, especially against rocket decks. A lot of the times you need to just use Expo to bait out their rocket, and then you just keep cycling through pumps, and then eventually you'll just overwhelm them with an elixir advantage.
Yeah, and you kind of bring up a good point too, is because you have the pump and the expo in this deck. If you do go against an expo user's worst nightmare in the rocket, at least you have two targets that they're going to be using their rocket on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of added the pump because I was seeing so much log bait decks and even some hog rocket decks that I decided if I had the pump, I would be able to play a bait game to where if they rocket the pump, they can't rocket the expo, and if they rocket the expo, then they can't rocket the pump.
It's funny, don't you feel like this game is kind of moving more and more that in that direction, where like no matter what deck you're using, you're almost always trying to bait out something with something else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, spells are a super huge part of the game, and yeah, I feel like spell bait decks are one of the strongest right now, and this deck lines up really well against pretty much any spell bait deck.
Yeah, I mean, and we're showing this deck in challenges today, but is it also a decent ladder deck, do you think, or not so much?
I've had a little bit of success on ladder with it, but on ladder, I would say probably sub in like Fireball, maybe for Pump, because Pump is kind of a card that helps you in the late game, but Fireball would help you out against like Three Musketeers. Minion hordes can be tough to deal with sometimes, and if you don't have archers in cycle. Um, but yeah, I think it could definitely work on ladder.
Okay, so for ladder sub out, I mean, I guess you could keep the pump if you want to get a ton of draws, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I
So,
I get draws right now, honestly, in grand challenges, just because against giant decks you have a really tough time breaking through, but at the same time you can keep up an elixir advantage and defend.
Yeah, so I guess that you have to play this deck. Like, I guess let's just take a step back here and talk about Siege in general. When you're playing a Siege deck, should you always kind of err on the side of patience?
Yeah, for the most part, with most siege decks, you want to be pretty patient. Other than if they say, if I didn't have pump and they committed to a pump, I'm gonna expo every time. And even sometimes, whenever I do have pump and they have pump, if they pump and I think that they don't have the right counters in hand or something like that, then I'll definitely go with an expo.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that was going to actually be my next question. So yeah, so when they pump, that's how you're going to punish is just play Expo.
Yes, it really depends. Like against Three Musketeers,
Well, how about first play of the game pump, and
always
you have
pump.
Expo in hand.
Um, do I have pump and expo in hand?
Let's pretend. Okay, well, let's go through both scenarios. So if you have pump, I assume you're just going to play pump as well.
Yeah, I would pump up.
Okay, so you don't have pump in your first 5 cards. Now what do you do? Do you play Expo?
Uh, yes, I would probably expo.
Okay. So there is a scenario that you'd offensively Expo not knowing their deck, but it's probably pretty rare.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, Once I have a feel for their deck and know what they're playing, like the matchups where I would go with an aggressive expo when they pump would be Three Musketeers and then like some Golem decks if I feel like I'm ahead on Elixir or they don't have good counters in hand.
Okay. So 2 questions about the Expo before we move on to for defense and common mistakes and stuff like that. So number one is what is the ideal way to support the Expo? So talk a little bit about you have the Tesla, you have Log, you have Ice Spirit, you have Ice Golem, you have Archers, you have like a lot of support troops. So talk about like the scenarios where you're going to use each one, kind of.
Okay, so for
Start out with the
starters,
Tesla.
yeah, Tesla is for mostly like balloons and hogs or anything else that's going to target a building because you can Tesla and then Mega Minion and Archers are kind of just catch-all, so you can use like a Tesla and then throw those in to support it a bit. Also, Tesla can do work to Mega Knights, P.E.K.K.A.s, pretty much anything that's going to be a pain to deal with, a big tank or anything like that. And then Ice Spear and Ice Golem, usually whenever I drop an Expo, I try to preemptively plant another troop in case they go with like an Inferno Tower or anything ranged that's going to immediately lock onto my Expo, like maybe a Cannon Cart or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
To buy you more
and
time to adjust after the fact.
yeah, but pretty much you have like 6 pretty good defensive cards to support the Expo, and you really just want to be feeling out their deck throughout the beginning of the game and then know what you need to use to counter what they're going to counter with.
Okay, and do you once you kind of get an awareness of what they have, are you ever going to predictive defend the Expo, like with a log or whatever?
Usually I don't preemptive log, because the log can pretty much get there before like they get almost any damage off on the Expo. So it's just not worth the risk generally unless maybe if I was 100% certain they were going to drop a Goblin Gang or something, I might go for that, but especially against log bait, like the pretty much the key to that matchup is just to keep logging their Goblin Barrels and pumping up.
Okay, so the second question about the Expo is because you have two structures in this deck, I guess three, including the Elixir Pump, but because you have the Expo and the Tesla, is there any ever a time that you'd play the Expo like in a defensive position, like on your side of the arena?
Generally not. The only situation where I would do that is if, say, they're playing a Golem deck without a big spell where they can hit like an Expo, a Tesla, and the Tower. Or if they're playing Three Musketeers, sometimes you can get a pretty good Expo off to kill some Musketeers or some Battle Rams or whatever.
Okay, yeah, and we're actually watching the Three Musketeer match right now, so we can kind of get a feel for you guys can get a feel for how Carter handles this type of a deck as well. Okay, so we've covered pretty much. I think we've pretty much covered everything about the actual Expo. I guess one last question on the hidden Tesla is when you're going to be using the Tesla to support the Expo, is it always going to be in the same position there, like one square closer to the bridge than the Expo is?
Uh, Yeah, pretty much it's always going to be like that unless your Expo's in a different position, but you
Hmm.
almost always want that Tesla to be hugging on the Expo.
And is there any? Well, you said unless the expo's in a different position. So what's another position you use the expo in?
Sometimes if I have either multiple Expos, then I'll put it closer towards the middle, and
Yeah, we're seeing
then
that right now.
the other reason to put it closer towards the middle would just be if they have Rocket and you have, say, a Mega Minion counter pushing, you don't want to let them kill the Mega Minion and the Expo, so then you would put the Expo closer towards the middle.
Okay. Is there ever a time that you use an expo against a pump that's placed in front of the king tower?
Usually I prefer to punish the pump instead of going for damage at the pump.
Okay. And obviously, I mean, we covered all the offensive strategy for this deck, but, I guess defensively, we pretty much covered that too. I mean, the cards pretty much speak for themselves. Are you playing is there any, like, keys to defense that we maybe need to cover before we get into a play-by-play here, or?
I would say, I mean, it really just depends on the matchup. You pretty much have the tools to defend against every deck. You just have to manage your elixir and keep efficiently cycling through your defensive troops
Yeah,
to
and
get back to your pump or
sorry.
expo.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
As an Expo player, do you, just in a nutshell, how do you handle a matchup where they do have a big tank, like a golem or something like that? Like, what is the go-to strategy?
Um, it depends on what their big spell is, but pretty much I just try to wait for the opportunity for them to either make a mistake or commit big onto one lane to where I can punish with an expo on the other side.
Okay, and you're not afraid to switch towers if they play like a tank, in the lane closest to the tower you're already targeting?
Yeah, definitely don't be afraid to switch towers because this deck, it doesn't have a lot of direct damage, so pretty much you're going to win just through expo damage and then maybe cycle a couple logs at the end.
Okay, cool. All right, man. Let's do a play-by-play on your 12th win here, if you don't mind.
All right, sounds good.
All right, I'm in the replay. I'm gonna press play on the count of three. Let me know when you're ready.
All right, I'm ready.
3, 2, 1, play. So yeah, just talk a little bit about your starting hand here and where your mind's at.
Yeah, so here I have pump in hand, so of course I'm going to use it. I don't know what he's playing yet, so not a whole lot else. And then here, when he drops the goblins, of course I'll log that and then just drop what I can on that hog. I will take a few hits, but it's okay to take a little bit of damage with this deck because you really can make some comebacks by pressuring the other lane or something like that. Cause
Yeah, or by getting that elixir advantage like you did there.
yeah, exactly.
So now that you have the pump down, you have the pump lead. Now what are you trying to do? You're trying to set up the expo.
I'm trying to get back to another pump.
Okay, all right. I should have known. All right.
Yeah, yeah. And
So you
single
pump
elixir,
this
that's
time,
what
and
it's all
now
about.
now you have a little defense going.
Yeah. So now I already have some stuff in that lane that he's going to be trying to push. And so when he drops the lightning, I know that he's low on elixir, and so I go ahead and go for an expo because I already had troops down.
Yep. Okay, I gotcha. Then he goes
So
for the hog, and you have the Tesla ready.
yeah, and then the ice spear also to kill some of those bats and pause the hog.
Perfect. And you still have the pump on the board.
Yeah, and I'm already back to another one, and I know he doesn't have hog in hand, and so just pump up again.
Yeah, sure, no brainer. What do you think about? I guess I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, so he
What do you
goes for
think
the
about
P.E.K.K.A
nothing?
there, and so
Yeah.
I just kite it to the other lane with an ice golem, and then just Mega Minion to finish cleaning it up.
Perfect.
But this guy, he definitely should not have played that P.E.K.K.A at the river. He wasn't the best player, but I mean,
Well, you
I
got to
was
12
at
wins though.
yeah. I mean, he got to 12 wins somehow, so he couldn't be too bad.
Yeah, maybe it was just a mistake. I guess we all make them.
Yeah,
All right, so here, yeah, I mean, he has the P.E.K.K.A and Hog and Lightning, so that you think it wouldn't be like a super easy match, but you're making it so far look pretty easy.
yeah.
Uh,
It's honestly with this deck, you can pretty much shred through any tank that they're gonna throw at you. The only ones that are really hard to deal with are like a golem and a giant because they're always going to be targeting your XBOW unless you Tesla, and then they're both just so tanky.
I remember my question now is you said you were okay with taking some damage to your tower with this deck, but it's obviously like nearly impossible to make a comeback when you do lose a tower. So, what type of situation, if you find yourself down a tower, like how are you going to try your best to make a comeback? Does your strategy change at all or no?
Um, if I find myself down a tower, I definitely need to go more aggressive to take the next tower, but then at the same time, I need to be defensive because after you lose one tower, it's going to be really hard to get the next one because you can't
Yeah,
push opposite lane really.
indeed, indeed. So you just be a little bit more aggressive and hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once you lose a tower, a lot of the times it's just game over right away.
Yeah, so I mean, in the you have to be definitely be patient and like kind of vigilant about not making silly mistakes or playing too aggressive. It sounds like with a siege deck like this.
Yeah, you have to be pretty careful, and like one mistake can easily cost you the game. I
Yeah,
mean, in any deck, but like this deck more than most.
yeah, for sure. And when you think about it too, it's just like it's this archetype has a really high win rate and a really low use rate. So it just goes to show you that the skill cap must be relatively high. But if you can study players like Carter, hopefully you guys can have some success with it as well. So Carter, before we let you go, any shout outs, anything like that you want to share with us?
Um, I don't know. Shout out to, I guess my current squad of guys love Migra Esports. We're doing game battles right now, and we recently got knocked out of SLAT League by Team Queso, but we're doing pretty good.
Hey, no shame in that, man. TQ, one of the best clans out there for sure. So
Yeah,
good job, man. And just wanted to thank you again for coming on. Really enjoyed the deck. I'm definitely going to give it a try myself. I'm not sure if I'll bust it out in King's Cup yet, but we'll definitely give it a shot and see how we do with it. So thanks again for coming on, man.
yeah. Thank you. Good luck in King's Cup.
Thanks, man. I'll need it. I mean, I have surgical, so I should be pretty good. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So, guys, make sure you go ahead and follow Carter on social media. I'll have the link in the description there. Huge shout out to Carter for coming on, as well as Bren Chong, my YouTube sponsor. Check out his information as well in the description below, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.